of the Second Bank of the United States of America, ending the bank in 1836. Jackson was convinced that central banking was used by the elite to take advantage of the average American, and instead implemented state banks, popularly known as pit banks. Westward Expansion. Indian removal. In 1830, Congress passed the Indian Removal Act, which authorized the president to negotiate treaties that exchanged Native American tribal lands in the eastern states for lands west of the Mississippi River. Its goal was primarily to remove Native Americans, including the 5 civilized tribes, from the American Southeast. They occupied land that settlers wanted. Jacksonian Democrats demanded the forcible removal of Native populations who refused to acknowledge state laws to reservations in the West. Whigs and religious leaders opposed the move as inhumane. Thousands of deaths resulted from the relocations, as seen in the Cherokee Trail of Tears. The Trail of Tears resulted in approximately 2,000 to 8,000 of the 16,543 relocated Cherokee perishing along the way. Many of the Seminole Indians in Florida refused to move west. They fought the Army for years in the Seminole Wars. Second party system. After the first party system of Federalists and Republicans withered away in the 1820s, the stage was set for the emergence of new party system based on well-organized local parties that appealed for the votes of almost all adult white men. The former Jeffersonian, Democratic-Republican, party split into factions. They split over the choice of successor to President James Monroe, and the party faction that supported many of the old Jeffersonian principles, led by Andrew Jackson and Martin Van Buren, became the Democratic Party. As Norton explains the transformation in 1828, Jacksonians believed the people's will had finally prevailed. Through lavishly financed coalition of state parties, political leaders, and newspaper editors, popular movement had elected the president. The Democrats became the nation's first well-organized national party. And tight party organization became the hallmark of 19th-century American politics. Opposing factions led by Henry Clay helped form the Whig Party. The Democratic Party had small but decisive advantage over the Whigs until the 1850s, when the Whigs fell apart over the issue of slavery. Behind the platforms issued by state and national parties stood widely shared political outlook that characterized the Democrats. The Democrats represented wide range of views but shared fundamental commitment to the Jeffersonian concept of an agrarian society. They viewed the central government as the enemy of individual liberty. The 1824 corrupt bargain had strengthened their suspicion of Washington politics. Jacksonians feared the concentration of economic and political power. They believed that government intervention in the economy benefited special interest groups and created corporate monopolies that favored the rich. They sought to restore the independence of the individual, the common man, that is the artisan and the ordinary farmer, by ending federal support of banks and corporations and restricting the use of paper currency, which they distrusted. Their definition of the proper role of government tended to be negative, and Jackson's political power was largely expressed in negative acts. He exercised the veto more than all previous presidents combined. Jackson and his supporters also opposed reform as movement. Reformers eager to turn their programs into legislation called for more active government. But Democrats tended to oppose programs like educational reform made the establishment of public education system. They believed, for instance, that public schools restricted individual liberty by interfering with parental responsibility and undermined freedom of religion by replacing church schools. Nor did Jackson share reformers' humanitarian concerns. He had no sympathy for American Indians, initiating the removal of the Cherokees along the Trail of Tears. The great majority of anti-slavery activists, such as Abraham Lincoln and Mr. Walters, rejected Garrison's theology and held that slavery was an unfortunate social evil, not sin. Westward expansion and manifest destiny. The American colonies and the new nation grew rapidly in population and area, as pioneers pushed the frontier of settlement west. The process finally ended around 1890 to 1912 as the last major farmlands and ranch lands were settled. Native American tribes in some places resisted militarily, but they were overwhelmed by settlers and the army, and after 1830 were relocated to reservations in the West. The highly influential frontier thesis of Wisconsin historian Frederick Jackson Turner argues that the frontier shaped the national character, with its boldness, violence, innovation, individualism, and democracy. Recent historians have emphasized the multicultural nature of the frontier. Enormous popular attention in the media focuses on the Wild West of the second half of the 19th century. As defined by Hayne and Farquhar, frontier history tells the story of the creation and defense of communities, the use of the land, the development of markets, and the formation of states. They explain, it is a tale of conquest, but also one of survival, persistence, and the merging of peoples and cultures that gave birth and continuing life to America. The first settlers in the West were the Spanish in New Mexico. They became U.S. citizens in 1848. The Hispanics in California, Californios, were overwhelmed by over 100,000 gold rush miners. California grew explosively. San Francisco by 1880 had become the economic hub of the entire Pacific coast with diverse population of 250,000. From the early 1830s to 1869, the Oregon Trail and its many offshoots were used by over 300,000 settlers. 49ers, in the California Gold Rush, ranchers, farmers, and entrepreneurs and their families headed to California, Oregon, and other points in the far west. Wagon trains took 5 or 6 months on foot. After 1869, the trip took days by rail. Manifest destiny was the belief that American settlers were destined to expand across the continent. This concept was born out of sense of mission to redeem the old world by high example, generated by the potentialities of new earth for building new heaven. Manifest destiny was rejected by modernizers, especially the Whigs like Henry Clay and Abraham Lincoln, who wanted to build cities and factories, not more farms. Democrats strongly favored expansion, and won the key election of 1844. After bitter debate in Congress, the Republic of Texas was annexed in 1845, leading to war with Mexico, who considered Texas to be part of Mexico due to the large numbers of Mexican settlers. The Mexican-American War, 1846-48, broke out with the Whigs opposed to the war, and the Democrats supporting the war. The U.S. Army, using regulars and large numbers of volunteers, defeated the Mexican armies, invaded at several points, captured Mexico City and won decisively. The Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo ended the war in 1848. Many Democrats wanted to annex all of Mexico, but that idea was rejected by Southerners who argued that by incorporating millions of Mexican people, mainly of mixed race, would undermine the United States as an exclusively white republic. Instead, the U.S. took Texas and the lightly settled northern parts, California and New Mexico. The Hispanic residents were given full citizenship and the Mexican Indians became American Indians. Simultaneously, gold was discovered in California in 1849, attracting over 100,000 men to Northern California in a matter of months in the California Gold Rush. Peaceful compromise with Britain gave